Today, we're going to explore the function and the functional unit in life cycle assessment. I'm Lise Laurin of EarthShift Global, and I'm pretty passionate about the functional unit. I think it's one of the most elegant concepts to come out of life cycle assessment, and I think it offers a lot of power. So I'll talk about that some more as we get into it. So let's start with the function. Why do we start with the function? Well, we really want to be able to compare things fairly. We want to be able to be comparing apples and apples, right? Not apples and oranges. So if we think about a bunch of different sizes of beverage containers, we need to understand what the function is and what the limitations are, right? We want to contain a carbonated beverage, for example, for 2 years with no discernible degradation. That allows us to say, this is what we're comparing. And if I think about, for example, a vehicle, commuting vehicle, well, then I can compare a pickup truck, I can compare an EV, I can compare a little Civic, Honda Civic. I can compare all of those. If my function is not commuting, but my function is I'm a carpenter and I need to carry a ladder, well, now I know that Honda Civic, it's not going to cut it. So that's not going to be an acceptable comparison. So the function starts us off, and then the functional unit defines what's being studied and includes a quantified performance of the product system. So that's where we get into that 2 years with no degradation for the carbonated beverage, the ability to carry a ladder for that truck or the vehicle. You could use a van, right? Because the van could have a ladder on it. So we're going to include that performance, but also we're going to quantify it now. So we're going to say 8 ounces of a carbonated beverage in our functional unit. That way, I can compare an 8-ounce container with a 10-ounce container with a 2-gallon container, right? I can look at all of those and understand what's going on. Okay, I want to get back to the value of the functional unit. Why is the functional unit so important? The functional unit is really, really valuable because it spurs innovation. If we were going to, and I'll go back to an example that really happened. We were working with a toy company and we were looking at the functional unit. So what could be a functional unit? Well, it could be a doll, right? But you can make all kinds of dolls and maybe they're not very good. What about a doll that will last for 2 years when used by a boisterous child? That's one that's kind of interesting, huh? That now we've got something that's got to be a bit robust. It's going to be a little more fun for the kid because it's not going to fall apart right away. But what if we took 2 steps back and said, what is the real function of a toy? And we want 5 hours of fun as a functional unit. Now I can look at the toy that lasts for an hour. I can look at the toy that lasts for 10 years or several generations and see how many hours of fun that they provide. So with that functional unit, providing that to the decision makers, providing that to designers, and getting them to think about this, what they're designing a little bit differently, can really allow new ways, new business models, new ways of producing product. Another example I think of is commuting or getting the groceries from the grocery store, right? We can use a car for that. We can use a bicycle with panniers for that. We could use a truck, of course. But maybe we could also use a zip car, right? A car for hire. We don't have to own the car. Somebody else could use it when we're not using it. What does that do? So this is the value of the functional unit. And it's part of the reason to get it right. The other part of it is to be able to have a real good foundation for your study and to make it as broad as possible. When I talk about that beverage container and I say it needs to last for 2 years with a carbonated beverage, well, I might say a carbonated or not carbonated beverage, right? Now my LCA covers even more than it did before. It's just that all of the containers have to be able to withstand the carbonation. All right, let's get into an example. Let's look at wall paint. What is a fair comparison of wall paint? Is it a can of paint? Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes one can of paint goes a whole wall because it's really thin, or it's really thick and it only does half the wall. So what about a meter squared of paint? Now we're getting closer, right? But sometimes when you try and paint, it doesn't cover very well, right? That thin paint, even though it covered the whole wall, well, you may have to cover it 3 times. You may have to paint it 3 times in order to get to that thickness that you want. So what about 1 meter squared of opaque paint? But then sometimes you paint a wall and 2 years later you got to paint it again because it looks terrible. So there's a time period as well here. So we have 1 meter squared of opaque paint over 15 years, for example. Now we can compare opaque paint. We can compare two paints on an equivalent basis. So one of them you have to repaint it a couple of times in the 15 years. Another paint, you don't. That paint might need 3 cans. The other one only needs 1. Well, I can deal with that. And we can do a fair comparison. Let's think about a road surface. So a road surface, we might want to say the function is to provide safe driving surface for up to so many vehicles of so much weight over a period of so many years in a specific climate zone. The functional unit might be a kilometer squared of that material. So let's talk about the reference unit. The reference unit and the functional unit are often confused. If you don't see a function in your functional unit, then you have a reference unit. The reference unit is the quantity of product needed to fulfill the functional unit. So for our 8-ounce beverage, we would need 1 8-ounce can, 0.8 10-ounce bottles, and if you had a 2-quart bottle, you'd only need a 16th of it. And so that's kind of the difference there is it's the quantity needed to meet the functional unit. There's no function in a reference unit. So we don't want to confuse that reference unit with the functional unit because not all bottles are the same, not all paints are the same, not all surfaces are the same. So we've got to see with that paint, how many cans does it take to meet our function? How many square meters or square kilometers of road surface do we need to last as long as we need to last? Sometimes you'll see functional units that basically are reference units. And that's going to be when you have a cradle to gate study. And often when you have no idea what's going to happen at the use phase, right? So if I look at these 2x4s, who knows what they're going to be used for? They may be used to make walls. They may be used to make a concrete form. They might be used to support something. You might make furniture out of them. There's all kinds of things. And so an LCA of these 2x4s kind of doesn't make sense to go all the way through to end of life unless you're going to be studying a wall system or a piece of furniture. So if we're not going to be studying all the way to end of life, then let's use a reference unit. And we might use a 2 by 4 by 10, for example. Um, in single product studies, the functional unit is sometimes the same as the reference unit because you don't have to compare. But thinking about that function, even when you're doing a single product study, helps you and helps your team, your design team, your commissioner, your C-suite. Think about things differently. Thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. If you have questions, reach out to me, reach out to earthshiftglobal.com to learn more. And we hope you come and join us for some more of these informational videos.